What happens when a wife seeks comfort from a stranger and her husband walks in at the worst moment? How does 1 second of misread contact become the reason for a marriage's lawful unravelling? Can a woman still claim innocence when the receipts say otherwise? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Alatheia, and I know how this sounds. But before you judge me, you need to hear everything. I didn't set out to destroy my marriage. I just wanted someone to understand me. For months, Graham barely looked up from his routines. Every conversation felt like walking through fog. I tried to tell him how I felt, but he'd nod like he was listening, and then go right back to grading papers or typing into that laptop like I wasn't even there. So when I found myself at that rooftop bar, venting to Danai, and Eli offered a kind word and a place to breathe, I let myself lean into it. Just a minute of comfort, a hand on my shoulder. Nothing happened, nothing, but that's exactly when Graham walked in. He didn't see the build-up, just that last second. His face didn't even change. He just turned around and left. Now people act like I cheated in public, like I planned to humiliate him. They don't know what our home was like before that night. They don't know how long I'd been feeling invisible. But they're all picking sides now, and somehow, I'm always the villain. Maybe I deserve that. Maybe not. I still don't know. I can still hear the sound the door made that morning. Soft, careful, final. Graham always closed things quietly, like he didn't want to disturb the air around him. That used to comfort me. Now it feels like a warning I ignored. The house was still half dark when I walked into the kitchen. The coffee machine light blinked, waiting for someone to care enough to turn it on. He'd already left for work, and the only sign he'd been there was his mug, rinsed and placed upside down beside mine. 2 cups, 2 corners, separate worlds. Jules's backpack was by the door. I made her toast she didn't eat and reminded her twice to grab her violin. She nodded without looking at me, her little braid slipping loose from the morning rush. I told myself she was just tired from rehearsal, not avoiding my eyes. I've started telling myself a lot of things lately. Graham used to leave me notes. Nothing romantic, just reminders like call the plumber or dinner with the Merrins Friday. But lately, those had stopped too. It's like the paper ran out along with the effort. Last week, I found one of his old notes crumpled behind the bread box. It said, "Pick up flowers for Al." The ink had faded, but seeing it made my throat ache. I wanted to ask him what happened to that man, but I didn't even know where to start. When he came home that night, I tried. He was still in his work clothes, tie loosened, eyes heavy. I asked how his day was. He said fine. I told him we never talk anymore. He said we talk plenty. I said talking isn't the same as connecting. He just looked at me, quiet and unreadable, like a teacher waiting for a student to realize they'd missed the lesson. He asked why I was so restless lately. I told him it was stress from work. He said maybe I should take a break. I told him maybe he should learn how to listen. He blinked once, slow, then said, "I do listen. You just don't like what you hear." That line sat between us like smoke. I wanted to fight, but he'd already turned toward the sink, rinsing his mug again, like that was the only thing worth doing. I didn't follow him. I opened a bottle of wine instead. Half a glass later, I was scrolling through my phone, seeing everyone else's smiling lives. Danae had posted another rooftop picture, string lights, cocktails, laughter. I sent her a message saying we needed to catch up. She replied right away, "You need a night out, girl." That night, the house felt too quiet. Graham worked late, grading or hiding. I couldn't tell which anymore. When he finally came home, I was already pretending to sleep. I felt the mattress dip beside me, then nothing. No arm around me, no whispered goodnight. Just distance. The next morning, I found his laptop open on the dining table. The screen had gone black, but the faint glow of the charger told me he'd been working late. I touched the trackpad out of habit, and for a split second the desktop flashed up. A calendar alert blinked before the screen locked. Storage, 2:10 p.m. I don't know why that stuck with me. It wasn't unusual, but the phrasing, so plain, so careful, felt deliberate. At work, I tried to shake it off. My office is just a big open co-working space, the kind with fake plants and motivational quotes on the walls. I've worked there for 3 years, managing local art events. I used to love it, the buzz, the color, the feeling of being needed. Lately, even the murals feel flat. My co-workers were chatting about weekend plans, and someone asked if Graham was coming to our next fundraiser. I said he might, though I knew he wouldn't. The last one he attended, he'd stood quietly in the corner while everyone else danced. People thought he was shy. I knew he was miserable. Danai texted me during lunch, rooftop after work, drinks on me. I stared at the screen for a while before replying yes. I needed to feel like myself again, whoever that even was. When I got home to change, Graham was in the kitchen, sorting papers into a neat stack. He didn't look up when I said hi. I told him I was meeting Danai. He asked if it was a late-night thing. I said probably. He nodded once, folded another sheet and said, "Just let me know if you'll need a ride." His voice was polite, almost formal. I hated it. I said, "I can take care of myself." He said, "I know. That's the problem." I grabbed my keys harder than I needed to and left before he could explain what that meant. The sky was the color of spilled ink when I got to the rooftop bar. Danai waved from a corner table, 2 drinks already waiting. The air smelled like citrus and music. I hadn't felt that light in months. She looked at me over the rim of her glass and said, "You look like you've been living under a rain cloud." I laughed and said, "Married life." She rolled her eyes. "You say that every time." Halfway through our second drink, I noticed a man leaning on the railing near our table. He had that easy posture people get when they know they're being watched but don't mind it. He caught me looking once, smiled, then looked away like it didn't matter. Danai nudged me and said, "He's been glancing over since you sat down." I said I wasn't interested, but my voice lacked conviction. We started talking about Graham, how he'd changed. I told her he wasn't affectionate anymore, that even when we fought, he stayed calm. "It's like arguing with a wall," I said. Danai frowned and told me maybe I was the one pulling away. I laughed too loudly and said, "You sound like him." The man by the railing moved closer, probably pretending to order another drink. He asked if we were celebrating something. I said we were surviving adulthood. He laughed. His name was Eli. He said he worked in town, some logistics thing. Danai gave me a look, half amused, half warning. I told him about my job, my events, the stress. He said it sounded meaningful, and for a moment I believed him. He had this way of leaning in, just enough to make you feel seen without it being intrusive. When Danai went to the restroom, he said, "You look like you carry too much." I said, "You don't even know me." He said, "Sometimes that's what makes it easier." By the time Danai came back, I was smiling again. It felt good to be noticed. When we finally left, the city lights blurred around me. Eli asked if I'd be there next week. I said maybe. He said he'd like that. I didn't tell Graham about any of it. When I got home, the living room was dark except for the soft glow from the hallway. Graham was sitting on the couch, laptop closed beside him. I said he didn't have to wait up. He said he wasn't waiting. I asked if he'd eaten. He said yes. I told him he could have texted me. He said, "You were busy." I started to explain, but he stood up, calm and slow, and said, "You don't owe me an explanation." I wanted him to sound jealous, angry, anything, but his voice was even, careful. That scared me more than shouting would have. He picked up his mug from the coffee table, rinsed it, and set it beside mine again. 2 cups, 2 corners. Then he said, "You should get some rest. You'll need it." I asked, For what? He said. For whatever comes next. Then he went upstairs, and I just stood there, listening to the soft creak of each step, trying to decide if he was threatening me or warning me. I poured myself another half glass of wine and sat on the couch where he'd been. The cushion was still warm. My phone buzzed once. Danai, sending a photo of us at the bar, our smiles wide, the skyline behind us. I almost posted it. But then I saw Graham's mug gleaming under the kitchen light, spotless and upside down, and I couldn't bring myself to hit share. So I just saved the photo instead, tucked it away like proof that I still existed somewhere outside this house. That night, before I went upstairs, I passed by the guest room. The door was half open. Inside, the bed was made too neatly, like a hotel room. A faint smell of printer toner hung in the air. I thought about knocking, but didn't. Instead, I closed the door softly, careful not to make a sound. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the shredder humming downstairs. It was faint, like the steady buzz of an insect behind glass. For a moment, I thought I had dreamed it. Then I smelled coffee. His coffee, dark roast, no sugar. Graham always started his days that way, organized, predictable, contained. I lay there staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds until I heard the sound stop. When it did, the silence felt heavier than the noise. By the time I went down, he was gone. His keys were missing from the hook, his travel mug rinsed and drying beside the sink. I touched the rim. Still warm. A single sticky note sat on the counter near it. Utilities. Paid. That was all. No love you, no see you tonight. Just confirmation that the lights would stay on. I stared at it for a long time, then crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. I told myself it didn't matter, that people fall into patterns. But part of me wanted him to leave one note that wasn't about bills or errands, something that proved he still saw me. I used to joke that we could run our whole marriage like a spreadsheet, neat columns and no surprises. Maybe that's what I got. At work, I couldn't focus. Everyone kept talking about the weekend fundraiser. My boss asked if I'd bring Graham this time. I laughed and said maybe, but my voice sounded thin. Danai stopped by my desk later, holding a coffee. "You look like you needed this," she said. I thanked her and told her I was fine. She didn't believe me. She never does. She asked about the guy from the rooftop, Eli. I pretended not to remember his name. "The one who kept smiling at you," she said. I rolled my eyes. He was just being friendly. She gave me that look, the one that says, "I know what you're doing, but I won't say it out loud." I told her Graham had been weird lately, distant. She said, "Maybe you're weird first." I didn't answer. That afternoon, an email came in from the event photographer. Attached were the photos from the rooftop night. I clicked through them quickly, looking for one of me and Danai, something harmless. But there it was, one frame with Eli's hand on my back, casual, light, nothing serious. Still, my stomach twisted when I saw it. I knew how it would look to someone else. I downloaded it anyway. I don't even know why. When I got home that evening, the house was clean. Too clean. Graham's shoes lined up perfectly by the door. His jacket hung straight on the hook. He was sitting at the table, flipping through the mail. I said hi. He nodded. I said I might go out later, meet Danai. He said, "You do that." The way he said it wasn't cruel. It was careful. And that's worse. I poured myself a glass of water, though I wanted wine. He asked if my work was going well. I said, "It's fine." He said, "Good." Then silence again. I wanted to scream at him, shake him, anything. I asked if he wanted to talk about whatever was bothering him. He said, "Nothing's bothering me." I said, "Something is." He said, "Not anymore." Later, when I went upstairs, I heard him open a drawer. A soft click, like something locking. I peeked down the hall and saw him close the guest room door behind him. That's when I noticed a small USB drive taped under one of the folders on his desk, labeled by date. I almost laughed at how paranoid he was getting, but something about it made my chest tighten. The next day, I met Danae for lunch at a cafe near work. She looked at me over her salad and said, "You look worse than yesterday." I told her she had a talent for compliments. She asked if I'd told Graham how lonely I'd been feeling. I said he wouldn't understand. She said, "Or you just don't want to hear what he'd say." I didn't answer because she was right. While we were talking, someone brushed past our table. I looked up. It was Eli. He grinned, surprised. "Twice in a week," he said. I smiled back, trying to sound casual. "Guess this city's small." Danae excused herself to take a call, and Eli asked if he could sit. I said sure for a minute. He asked how my week was. I told him about work, about how my husband was a bit of a ghost lately. He nodded like he'd heard it all before. He said, "Sometimes people disappear long before they leave." That line sat too easily on his tongue. I didn't like how much it rang true. I changed the subject, asked about his job. He talked, I listened, and for once it felt nice to have someone fill the silence. When Danae came back, she gave me another look. I ignored it. Before he left, Eli touched my hand lightly, like punctuation. I should have pulled away. I didn't. That night, Graham asked if I'd had a good day. I said yes. He said he was glad. Then he went to the laundry room. I followed him, trying to start small talk, but he was folding his shirts with this eerie precision. Every line matched. I asked if he wanted help. He said, "No, I've got my system." I laughed and told him he sounded like a machine. He said, "Machines don't forget things." I didn't know what that meant. When I came back to the kitchen, his laptop was open again. The spreadsheet glowed on the screen. I wasn't trying to snoop. It was just right there. The columns were labeled: date, location, observation. I scrolled without thinking. My breath caught when I saw an entry marked rooftop photo posted. Another one, cafe, 11:45. My hands went cold. How would he know about that lunch? The sound of his footsteps made me jump. I slammed the laptop shut and pretended to be looking for my phone. He asked if everything was okay. I said, "Of course." He nodded slowly, then said, "I'll be out for a bit." He grabbed his keys, the same neat motion as always, and left. I stood there in the empty kitchen, my reflection staring back at me from the dark window. For the first time, I felt like maybe I'd started something I couldn't control. Danae called later that night, asking how things were. I told her Graham was being weird, that he might be keeping tabs on me. She asked if I had done anything to make him suspicious. I said no, maybe just bad timing. She didn't sound convinced. Before bed, I checked my phone. A notification blinked. Someone had tagged me in a photo. I opened it and froze. It was the picture from lunch, the one where Eli's hand brushed mine. It looked intimate even though it wasn't. My heart pounded. I untagged myself immediately. Then I saw that Graham's mother, Marla, had liked the photo before I removed it. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again, the same spot where morning light always hits. I imagined him scrolling, seeing that image, saving it somewhere in that neat little archive of his. I wanted to believe he wouldn't, but I knew better. The next morning, the air in the house felt cold, even though the thermostat said 72. I found another sticky note on the counter. "Trash out Thursday. Bank. Call." The handwriting was his, steady and deliberate. I flipped it over. On the back, faintly, almost erased, were 2 words. "Follow up." I pressed my thumb over them until the ink smudged. That evening, I sat in the driveway for a long time before going inside. The sky had turned that dull grey that makes everything look like old paper. When I finally walked in, Graham was sitting on the couch again, laptop closed, calm as ever. He asked if I wanted dinner. I said I wasn't hungry. He said, "You should eat." I said, "You should care." He looked up then, met my eyes and said, "I do, just differently now." I didn't know what to say to that, so I went upstairs. On my nightstand was a small sealed envelope, my name written on the front. Inside was a printout of that lunch photo, me and Eli, mid-laugh, his hand on mine. Underneath, Graham had written, "I see more than you think." I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. I wanted to call Dani, to tell her how wrong this felt, but my throat locked. Instead, I tore the photo in half, then quarters, then smaller, until it was nothing but scraps. But the pieces still felt heavy in my hands. When I finally lay down, I could hear that faint hum again from the guest room. Printer, shredder, something. I closed my eyes and tried not to imagine the sound of my own life being sorted, filed, and destroyed line by line. Saturday morning started with the smell of rain and something burning. I ran downstairs, thinking I'd left the stove on, but it was just the toaster smoking again. Graham had already unplugged it. He was standing by the counter, sleeves rolled up, calm as ever. I said I could handle breakfast. He said, "I'm just making sure the place doesn't catch fire." It wasn't a joke, not really. He had that same distant tone he'd started using lately. Polite, quiet, infuriating. I told him he could stop acting like everything was fine. He said he wasn't acting. Then he handed me a new toaster box, still sealed. I didn't remember buying it. The receipt was tucked under the handle, with my name written in his tidy block letters. "You keep forgetting things," he said. I thought I'd help. I wanted to throw it, to shatter something, but instead I smiled and said, "Thank you." That's what I do. Pretend composure. He left soon after, saying he had errands. I asked where, but he only said, "Downtown, 9:25. After he left, I checked his calendar on the fridge. He'd written it there too, small, neat. Downtown, 9:25. The same handwriting that used to leave hearts in grocery lists. I spent the morning pacing. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The clock ticking, the faint hum of the fridge, the hollow space where conversation should be. I texted Dani, asked if she wanted to meet. She said she couldn't, but I should go outside, clear my head. So I did. The park trail near our neighborhood was damp and quiet, the kind of place couples walk when they still have things to say. I hadn't been there in months. I was halfway down the path when someone called my name. Eli. He was leaning against the rail near the overlook, wearing that same soft grin like he'd been waiting for me. He said I looked tired. I told him I hadn't been sleeping well. He said, "People don't lose sleep unless they're guilty or scared." I laughed, said maybe both. He didn't laugh. We walked for a while, talking about nothing. He told me he'd quit his job, said he needed a break from corporate nonsense. I told him I envied that freedom. He said, "You have more freedom than you think." That sounded like a compliment, but it also felt like a challenge. When the rain started again, he pulled me under one of the shelters near the bend. I said I should head back. He said I didn't have to rush. I should have left. Instead, I stayed, talking about how Graham barely looked at me anymore. Eli listened, close enough that I could smell rain on his jacket. At one point, he brushed a strand of hair from my face. The touch was light, but it lingered. I didn't stop him. I didn't move either. Then a car horn echoed down the hill. My heart jumped before I even saw it. Graham's car, his old grey sedan, passed slowly along the curb. I told myself it was coincidence. He didn't stop. He didn't honk. Just drove by like any stranger. I turned to Eli and forced a smile. Said I really had to go. Back home, the house was quiet again. His jacket was on the hook. He'd beaten me there somehow. I asked how his errands went. He said fine. I asked what kind. He said, "Just the kind you plan ahead for." Then he turned back to his laptop. I went upstairs to shower, trying to rinse off the rain and the guilt that had settled on my skin. When I came out, his mug was on the counter again, rinsed, dried, placed opposite mine. I wanted to scream, say something, anything, but he just moved around me like I was furniture. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the car, the timing. I opened his laptop while he was in the shower. It asked for a password now. He'd never used one before. I closed it quickly, heart pounding. When he came out, I pretended to be reading on my phone. He said, "You're restless again." I said, "You're distant again." He nodded like we'd both made fair points. Then he picked up his phone and typed something before putting it face down on the table. The next morning, Danai called. She asked if I was okay because apparently someone had posted a photo from the park. "You and that guy," she said carefully. "It's just you two talking, but people notice things." My throat tightened. I opened social media, and there it was. Me and Eli, standing close under the shelter, his hand mid-gesture like a reach. The caption read, "Rain can't stop connection." My stomach dropped. I untagged myself immediately, but the image was already out there. When I got to work, my boss called me into her office. She said the board saw the photo, asked if everything was fine at home. I said it was a misunderstanding. She said I should be careful with optics. I nodded, pretending to understand. By the time I got home that evening, Graham was already there, sitting at the table with his laptop open again. I asked if he'd seen the post. He said yes. I said it wasn't what it looked like. He said, "It never is." I started crying, real tears this time, the kind I couldn't control. I told him I just wanted someone to listen. He said, "You could have said that instead of finding someone who pretends to." I asked why he wasn't shouting, why he wasn't angry. He said, "Because I'm finished wasting energy." Then he closed the laptop, slid a folder into his bag, and went upstairs. I followed him halfway up before stopping at the landing. The guest room door was open now. Inside, the bed was stripped bare, sheets folded on the chair. His suitcase sat upright near the wall, half packed. I asked if he was leaving. He said, "Eventually." I said he was overreacting. He said, "Maybe you're underestimating me." Later that night, when I checked my phone again, I saw that the park photo had disappeared completely. Deleted from the original page, gone from tags. Relief washed over me for a second, until I realized someone had to request that takedown. I hadn't. The next morning, I noticed something new on his keyring. An extra key, small and brass, the kind you'd use for storage. When I asked, he said, "Just being organized." I asked if he was planning to move out. He said, "Planning is smart." Every time I tried to talk, he answered, in these clipped neutral tones that made me feel insane. I started doubting my own memory, wondering if maybe I was exaggerating things. Maybe I had made too much of nothing. Danai called that night, whispering like she didn't want someone to hear. "He's not saying anything publicly, right?" she asked. I said no. She said, "Good, keep it that way." I laughed bitterly. "You think I can control him?" She sighed. "I think he's controlling more than you realize." That same night, I heard a faint noise outside, like a car door closing. I peeked through the blinds. Graham was standing by the trunk of his car, something silver glinting under the streetlight. He slid it into a small case, then locked the trunk and walked back inside. When he came to bed, he lay on the edge, turned away from me. I whispered, "I'm sorry." He didn't move. After a long pause, he said quietly, "No, you're not. You're scared." I turned toward him, but he stayed still. The sound of rain started again, tapping against the window. I tried to convince myself that the car, the folder, the calendar alerts, all of it, were coincidences. But then his phone vibrated once on the nightstand, and in the reflection of the screen, I saw one unread message at the top. Follow-up confirmed. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep. My heart pounded so loud I was sure he could hear it. The rain grew heavier, drumming against the glass, as if the whole sky wanted to drown the silence between us. When morning came, the mug was there again. His spotless, mine, half full. Next to it, a new note, meeting, personal. Same neat handwriting, same calm, that felt more dangerous than anger ever could. Monday started with an email from the school reminding parents about the upcoming recital. Jules had a solo this year, violin, something she'd practiced for weeks. I printed the message and stuck it on the fridge next to Graham's neat calendar squares. The air in the kitchen was thick with that faint toner smell again, the kind that lingers even when the printer isn't running. When Graham came down, I told him about the recital. He nodded, poured his coffee, and asked what time it was. 6 on Thursday, I said. He wrote it down immediately. Small letters, precise numbers. I told him it was sweet that he was coming. He said, "Of course I'm coming. I don't miss things." That sounded pointed, but I ignored it. At work, I tried to stay busy. Danai called around lunch, asking if things had cooled off. I told her yes, but my voice cracked on the word. She said she'd seen another post about me, something in the comments under an old photo. I didn't want to know. "It's just people stirring things," she said gently. "Don't feed it." I promised I wouldn't. That evening, the house felt colder. Graham was in the living room sorting through envelopes. I asked if he wanted to eat together. He said he'd already eaten. "You were late," he added, not accusingly, just factual. I said traffic had been awful. He nodded and went back to his stack of papers. I sat down across from him. "Can we talk about what's going on?" I asked. He didn't look up. "You've been different," I said. "You don't even try to fix things." He said, "Fix what?" I said, "Us." He finally looked at me, his eyes steady. "You talk like it's a broken appliance," he said. "You don't fix people. You listen to them before they stop talking." I hated the calm in his voice. It made me feel small. "You're making this into something it's not," I said. "I haven't done anything wrong." He said, "Then you'll have no trouble saying that when it matters." "What does that mean?" I asked, but he didn't answer. Instead, he stood and gathered the envelopes into a folder labeled Household. As he passed me, I caught a glimpse of another folder underneath, one marked Archive A in faint pencil. When I picked Jules up from school the next day, she was quieter than usual. I asked how practice went. She said fine. I asked if her dad had picked her up yesterday, like he said he would. She nodded but didn't look at me. "Was he mad?" I asked. She shrugged. "He just said to focus." She looked out the window for a while, then asked, "Are you and Dad mad at each other?" I told her no, of course not. She said, "You don't sit together anymore." My throat tightened. I told her grown-ups argue sometimes but still love each other. She nodded, unconvinced. Thursday came faster than I expected. The recital hall was already full when we arrived. I spotted Graham near the back, his hands in his pockets, eyes on the stage. I waved. He nodded once. Jules stood beside me, clutching her violin case. "You'll do great," I said. She smiled weakly and went to join her class. During the intermission, one of the other mums came over and asked if everything was okay at home. "You've been quiet online," she said, "and I saw something weird on that community page. Some photo." My stomach flipped. "People love drama," I said quickly. She gave me a pitying smile and walked away. When Jules finally played, she was beautiful, focused, steady, older somehow. I looked at Graham, waiting for him to smile, but he didn't. He clapped politely, hand slow, face unreadable. When it was over, Jules ran straight to him, not me. Outside, while we waited for her to pack up, I tried again. "You could at least pretend to be happy," I said. He said, "I am happy for her." "That's not what I mean," I said. "Then say what you mean," he replied. His tone was so level, it almost broke me. I told him I couldn't keep living like strangers. He said, "Then stop lying." My chest burned. "To you?" I asked. He said, "To yourself." Before I could answer, Jules came running up, waving her sheet music. "Grandma's coming to dinner tomorrow," she said excitedly. "Dad said she'd pick me up early to help bake." I froze. Graham met my eyes, calm as always. I thought it'd be good for her, he said. I wanted to argue, but Jules was right there, smiling. The next morning, the house smelled like cinnamon and printer ink. Marla's voice drifted from the kitchen when I came downstairs. She greeted me politely, her tone measured. Jules is in the car, she said. We're heading to the store. She looked around the house, noticing the empty wine glass on the counter, the folder on the table. You should rest, she said. You look tired. I thanked her, unsure whether it was kindness or judgment. After they left, I noticed something on the hallway table, a small USB drive, labeled with that day's date. It wasn't hidden, just placed there like a reminder. My hand hovered over it, but I didn't touch it. Later, when Graham came home, I told him I'd run into his mother. He said she'd mentioned it. She's worried, he said. I said, about me? He said, about Jules. I asked what that meant. He didn't answer. That night, Danai called again. She said she'd heard something at work, that someone had contacted my board about reputation risks. I felt my stomach drop. Who would do that? I asked. She hesitated. Maybe someone who's documenting everything. I laughed it off, but it didn't feel funny. Friday evening, Marla dropped Jules off just as the sun was setting. I thanked her and said maybe we could all have dinner next week. She smiled faintly and said, that might depend on how things go. When I asked Jules about the baking, she said they made cinnamon bread and that Grandma helped her practice her recital piece again. She said Dad's very organized, Jules added, like it was a compliment. Graham came home later than usual. I tried to act normal, set the table, poured water instead of wine. He thanked me. We ate quietly until Jules asked, Are you and Mum okay now? He looked at her and said softly, We're figuring things out. She nodded, satisfied. I smiled, but my hands were shaking under the table. After dinner, Jules went upstairs to read. Graham stayed at the table, flipping through his phone. I asked if we could talk privately. He said sure, but didn't move. I said, Not here. He followed me to the living room. I told him I was sorry, that I didn't want to lose our family over misunderstandings. He said, You don't lose something you gave away. I said he was twisting things, that he'd already decided I was guilty. He said, You're the one who said it wasn't what it looked like. That means you saw how it looked. I wanted to shout. Instead, I said, You're hurting Jules. He said, I'm protecting her. From what? I demanded. From confusion, he said. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, slid it into his pocket and said, I have a meeting early tomorrow. I asked if it was another personal one. He smiled faintly. Something like that. When he went upstairs, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the faint blue light coming from under the guest room door. It flickered once, then went still. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally stood, the house felt smaller somehow, like it had been folded neatly into something I no longer recognized. I thought about calling Danai, telling her everything, but I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. Instead, I checked the fridge. The recital flyer was gone. In its place was a new note in that perfect handwriting, Monday, meeting 9:30, bring forms. I traced the letters with my finger until the ink blurred. Upstairs, the hallway creaked softly. Then the light under the guest room door clicked off. The printer hummed once more before settling into silence. Saturday morning came with sunlight that felt too sharp, cutting through the curtains like judgment. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Graham's face from the night before. Calm, unreadable, the look of someone who already knew the ending but was waiting for me to catch up. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock. Jules was at Marla's again. He said it would be good for her to stay the weekend. He didn't ask if I agreed. I went downstairs to make coffee. The machine sputtered, steam rising like breath. On the counter sat another note in his neat handwriting. Dinner tonight, 7 Wu, family restaurant. I stared at it, confused. We hadn't gone out together in months. Maybe this was his way of trying again, or maybe it was something else. I wanted to believe the first. All morning I cleaned without thinking, vacuuming, wiping counters, folding towels that didn't need folding, anything to make the silence less heavy. Around noon, I checked my phone. Danai had texted, "You okay?" I typed, "We're having dinner tonight," and she replied with a single question mark. I didn't explain. I didn't want to jinx whatever this was. At 6, I dressed carefully. Nothing too flashy, just a navy dress he'd once said looked respectful. I laughed, remembering it. Respectful. What a strange word for love. When we arrived, the restaurant was already crowded. I spotted Marla and Jules at a long table near the window. The sight of them threw me off balance. "Family dinner," I murmured. Graham just nodded and pulled out a chair for me. Polite, distant, rehearsed. Jules grinned, proud to see both of us there together. "Can I order the big sundae later?" she asked. Graham smiled and said, "If you finish your dinner." I watched him carefully, waiting for warmth, some sign that this was a real step toward normal. But everything about him felt staged. His tone, his posture, even the way he folded his napkin. Marla asked about my work. I told her things were fine, busy as usual. She said, "That's good. Busy keeps people out of trouble." Her eyes didn't move from mine. I swallowed hard and smiled. Halfway through the meal, Jules started talking about her recital again, her hands waving as she described how her teacher said she had perfect rhythm. Graham nodded proudly. "You did amazing," he said. Then, turning to me, he added, "You must have seen the clip." I frowned. "What clip?" He smiled faintly. "Someone recorded it. It's online." My heart skipped. I didn't like the way he said it, like he'd already checked, like he knew I hadn't watched. "Of course I saw it," I said quickly. "She was great." Marla reached for her glass, her voice calm. "You've always had a talent for saying what people expect to hear." I stared at her, unsure if it was an insult or advice. Then Graham lifted his glass. "To Jules," he said, "and to clarity." Everyone clinked glasses. The word stuck in my throat. Clarity. I took a sip, just to keep my hands from shaking. Dinner dragged on. The waiter brought extra napkins. Conversations floated from nearby tables. I caught fragments, laughter, clinking forks, a child's cry, and felt miles away from it all. When dessert came, Jules insisted I try a bite. I smiled, pretending sweetness could fix anything. Graham set his fork down and looked at me. "You've been restless," he said softly, almost conversational. "I get that." I blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged. "It means I understand people make mistakes when they feel unseen." I felt heat rise in my face. "Are we really doing this here?" I whispered. He tilted his head. "Doing what?" Marla cleared her throat. "Maybe this isn't the place." But Jules was too busy with her sundae to notice. I forced a smile. "You're turning dinner into theatre again," I said. "You always do this when you want to look noble." He stayed calm. "I'm not performing. I'm processing." The table went quiet, except for the soft sound of Jules's spoon scraping glass. I said, "We can talk later, at home." He shook his head. "No, later's what got us here." I felt my voice slipping. "You're embarrassing yourself." He looked me straight in the eye. "No, Alatheia, I'm preparing myself." Marla stood suddenly. "Jules, why don't we get some air?" Jules looked confused but obeyed. The two of them walked toward the door. I watched them go, relief flooding me. At least my daughter wouldn't see whatever this was turning into. When they were gone, I leaned in. "If you're trying to scare me, it's not working," I said. "You think silence makes you powerful, but it just makes you pathetic." He folded his napkin neatly and placed it beside his plate. "I'm not trying to scare you," he said. "I'm trying to do this properly." "Properly?" I laughed, sharp and shaky. "What does that even mean?" "It means I'm finished explaining myself." He stood up, adjusted his jacket and took a slow breath. "You'll understand soon." The waiter approached, hesitant, asking if everything was okay. I said yes, too quickly. Graham thanked him, left cash on the table, and said he'd meet us outside. When he walked away, I felt everyone's eyes on me, the polite diners pretending not to stare, the low murmur of curiosity spreading like static. I sat there frozen, staring at the folded napkin where he'd been. Marla and Jules came back in. "Where's your father?" she asked. "He just stepped out," I said, my voice brittle. Marla looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, "You should be careful how you tell this story later." We left soon after. Graham was by the car, calm as always, holding the door open for Jules. On the drive home, no one spoke. Jules fell asleep in the back seat, her head tilted toward the window. I watched streetlights flash across her face and wondered if this was what endings looked like. Quiet, organized, almost merciful. When we got home, Graham carried Jules upstairs. I stayed in the living room, staring at the reflection of the hallway lamp in the window. When he came back down, he said, "Thank you for behaving tonight." "Behaving?" I snapped. "You made a scene." He shook his head. "No, I made a decision." I asked if he was leaving. He said, "Not yet." Then he turned toward the stairs. Before he reached the landing, I said, "You can't just walk away after everything we built." He paused, looked back once and said, "I can. I just plan to handle it properly." I wanted to throw something, to scream, to demand that he tell me what properly meant. But he was already gone, his footsteps fading into the guest room. The house fell silent again. I stared at his empty chair, at the clean plate, the folded napkin, the thin slip of paper from the check still on the table. His handwriting was on the back. One line, steady and small. Monday. Be home by noon. I sat there long after midnight, the words echoing in my head. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself he was bluffing. But deep down, I knew. His calm wasn't surrender, it was preparation. And whatever properly meant, it was already in motion. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the living room floor like an accusation. I was still in last night's dress when the doorbell rang. A man in a grey suit stood there, calm and polite. "Alatheia, Merrin?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me a sealed envelope and said, "You've been served." My hands shook as I opened it. Legal separation, temporary custody orders, formal notice. Through the glass door, I saw Graham waiting by his car, Jules beside him. He didn't look angry, just certain. Then they drove away and the house went silent.